Data Leadership Lessons podcast. I'm your host, Anthony J. Algman. Data is everywhere in our businesses, and it takes leadership to make the most of it. We bring you the people, stories, and lessons to help you become a data leader. Our show is produced by Algman Business Media, where we make having your own video podcast as easy as joining a video call and sending an email. At Algman Business Media, the stage is yours. Today on Data Leadership Lessons, we welcome Doug Laney. Doug is a well-known thought leader on data and analytics strategy. He is the originator of the field of Infonomics and is the author of the best-selling book, Infonomics, How to Monetize, Manage, and Measure Information for Competitive Advantage. Doug is the Data and Analytics Strategy Innovation Fellow with the consultancy West Monroe. Doug, welcome to the show. It's been a long time coming.
Thanks, Anthony. Great to be with you.
So like we do with all of our first-time guests, would you please take a moment to tell the audience a bit more about your career and how it led to the creation of Infonomics and everything else that you're doing these days?
Yeah, well, I actually started my career at Arthur Andersen back in the day, before it was, even before it was Andersen Consulting and, of course, before it was Accenture. And now I'm with West Monroe, which kind of feels like coming home because West Monroe is formed by some former Arthur Andersen consultants. So great firm, very happy to be here. Really innovative, and that's one of the reasons I joined. Is West Monroe is a great platform for doing some really innovative things around data and analytics. So I spent a number of years at Arthur Andersen or Andersen Consulting, and then got into the software industry a number of years in some of the early pioneering expert systems, artificial intelligence type companies, where I did some knowledge work there, and then got pulled into data warehousing, which I thought was kind of boring, but ended up finding it to be pretty exciting field, building large, well, at the time large, we wouldn't call them large today, data warehouses for major companies. I got a chance to move to Australia with one of the companies I was with and run the Asia Pacific business there. While I was there, I started doing some more speaking and writing. And at one of the events, I think at a DCI conference, if you remember those, somebody came up to me after I spoke and he said, "Hey, did you come up with those slides yourself?" And I said, "Well, yeah, why?" I was talking about data warehousing methodology. And he said, "Do you want to join Meta Group," which was a spinoff of Gartner at the time, which got reabsorbed by Gartner later on. I said, "Yeah, that sounds cool." So on moving back to the U.S., I ended up joining Meta Group, and spent the better part of 12 years at Meta and Gartner as a research analyst and advisor, doing a lot of speaking and writing. And the second time I joined Gartner, I said, "Listen, I've been working on this idea about data as an actual corporate asset." And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, back at Meta Group was during the 9/11 terror attacks, and some clients in the Twin Towers, lost their data. They lost they didn't know who their customers were anymore. The data was all on site, on-prem and without offsite backups. And so these companies didn't know who their customers were. They didn't know who their employees were. They lost their contracts. It became a real existential event for them. And not to be callous, but they told me, they said, we definitely obviously mourn the loss of some of our employees, but we can hire more employees. We just can't get our data back. It's gone. And so what they did was submit claims to their insurers for the value of the data they lost. And the insurers said, sorry, we don't consider data to be property, therefore we're not going to cover it as part of your P&C policies. So that really got my attention, and I got to thinking about, well, isn't data property? Isn't it an asset? Why not? I helped some of the businesses in the Twin Towers value their data so that they could kind of determine what their loss was. And then got to thinking more about, if data is an asset, then, why isn't it on the balance sheet? And what does that mean to organizations because they don't measure data as an actual asset? Is that really why so many companies don't really manage their data with the same kind of discipline as the way they manage their other assets? And then I said, well, why do you manage any asset? You manage any asset so that you can generate value from it. The old adage is you can't manage what you don't measure, and that you can't. I think it follows that you can't monetize what you're not managing well, and that's really the core of Infonomics, is about getting companies to measure their data so that they can get the support budgets, resources that they need to manage it like an actual asset, and then put them in a better position to generate optimal economic value from it. So that's the crux of the book. Gartner supported me in writing the book and publishing it, and it's been very well received. And then I got to know the folks at West Monroe, and they said, listen, we want to build a practice based on these concepts. And I said, well, I guess I've had enough just talking about it at Gartner. It's enough to actually put it into practice. And so I joined West Monroe exactly a year ago today.
Oh, congratulations. And in full disclosure, I did work for West Monroe for a period of time in the early 2010s. And so I know that organization well, still have a lot of friends over there. Really excited to see what you all are doing and how it's how that's progressing. I remember a year ago when I had heard that West Monroe had brought you on. It was great.
It's a great culture, great people. It's super inclusive, collaborative, supportive, even egalitarian. Like everybody's voice matters at West Monroe. It's not like some of the other, I won't name names, consulting firms that I've been with.
Yeah, well, and the energy I think is really impressive, and that fits your style very well. I know. So thanks. I want to talk a little bit about this the concept fundamentally of data as an asset, because I think that clearly it resonates around. It has data clearly has real value. You're preaching to the choir in this audience of data as an asset, having real value. But there's obviously
you must not be an accountant then. The accountants don't agree.
Well, I mean, I don't know. We have some accountants in the audience, I'm sure, of the show, but definitely have a lot of folks who build their careers working with data. And I think that's become even more prevalent these days, where most businesses have a substantial investment in what they're doing with data because they see the value in it. And I think that that's something that we can treat as a assumption at this point. But I think what I'm curious about, and I know the book talks about this some, is assets typically are something you consume and then they go away, whereas with data, in many ways, if you use it and do things with it, you actually create additional value and additional data, and it almost works backwards to the consumption of regular assets. Can you talk about that dynamic and how that's so unique and interesting with the data space?
Sure. It's hard to go a day or a week or a month without hearing somebody talk about data as being the new oil, right? And while that certainly reflects an understanding or appreciation that data is a driver of the economy at a macro level, the way oil perhaps was at the, early in the, or later in the Industrial Revolution, but it misses the point, like you say, that data has these unique economic characteristics that that oil doesn't have. When you consume a drop of oil, you can only consume it one way at a time, and when you consume a drop of oil, it turns into heat, energy, and pollutants, and that when you consume a drop of oil, like you say, it doesn't create more oil, it doesn't create more, of some kind of asset. And so data is very unique that way. It's what economists would call a non-rivalrous, meaning you can use it multiple ways simultaneously, non-depleting, doesn't go away when you use it, and the progenitive asset, meaning it creates more of itself when you use it. And the companies that are really thriving in the digital economy, data economy, whatever you want to call it today, are the ones who are taking advantage of that. In fact, Jeff Bezos has a term for that. He calls it, a flywheel effect.
So as people understand this kind of reinforcing behavior that data has, is that relevant to the work we do with data, or does it even matter? Is data work directly influenced by this economic function, and should we be paying more attention to that than maybe our data administrators and data analysts typically do?
Yeah, I think that's where the measurement part comes in. According to your current accounting standards, you can no longer capitalize or recognize the value of your company's data on your balance sheet. Right. So that puts a lot of companies into a bit of a quandary. Okay, we've got this thing we're calling an asset, but according to accountants, it's not really an asset. And therefore, how do we get the budgets and resources and support that we need to actually treat it like an asset. Interestingly, after 9/11, the insurance industry realized it was a bit exposed, and it updated the commercial general liability policy template used by all insurers for so they updated the template to explicitly exclude data from P&C policies. They did that a month after 9/11. And then, not to be outdone, the accountants said, if the insurance industry isn't going to recognize data as an asset, and the courts are confused on the matter, I'll talk about that in a moment, then we can't recognize it as an asset. So they updated a key financial standard, FAS or IAS 38, which deals with how to recognize intangibles, to expressly say that your data can't be capitalized. The courts, like I said, are confused on the matter. Some courts have fallen on the side of where there have been cases related to data being misused or damaged or stolen, or the courts sometimes have issued rulings along the lines of data constituting property because it can be represented by bubbles on an optical disc, or it can be printed. Other courts have said, well, since electrons have negligible mass, data shouldn't be considered property. So that's the kind of crazy, confusing world we live in. And, if you look to the government for some help, there really hasn't been a lot of help other than in privacy regulations. In fact, there was a U.S., I wrote about this in the book, a U.S. Senate subcommittee hearing on how to evolve a 1930s style accounting system to the 21st century. So why 1930s? Well, that's when the asset classes were defined by the SEC coming out of the Great Depression to formalize financial reporting a bit more. And at that time, it was before the information age, so there was no real reason to think about data as a separate kind of asset. It was all in books and magazines and ledgers and so forth. So here we are 90 years later in the accounting profession. The courts, insurance companies, the government haven't come around to fully acknowledging data as property or as an asset.
Well, and what's interesting is I think about the data management hats that we often wear and with data governance is that a lot of those activities tend to be driven by data as a liability as much as data as an asset because of the governance, the GDPR and CCPA and like the privacy concerns and all that. People see, data is a big risk, but and then it's also an asset. Is this unique to data too, or are there other assets that parallel that as both? I think they're the energy analogy can apply where you have a lot of energy. Are you creating a battery or are you creating a bomb? And so
here's where we get into a little syntactic conundrum, which is when people say liability, they often mean risk, but in an accounting sense, a liability is something that you owe someone else.
Very true. Very true.
Okay, so if we're mixing and matching the term liability and asset, we should be talking about liability in an accounting terminology, which is something you owe someone else. Data is very rarely, if ever, something that you owe someone else. But in common vernacular, liability is a risk. Okay, so yes, data can pose a risk. Just having it poses a risk. Using it improperly or handling it improperly poses a risk, but not a balance sheet liability.
Right. Well, I appreciate that clarification because I do think, especially those of us who are not as deep in accounting, will often make that kind of linguistic slip and confuse the accountants where they think very literally. And this is a consulting thing where you have words that you may use in a more colloquial way that people have very loaded meanings to. I once said in an energy meeting, I was working with an energy company, and I actually made a point around how this thing that we wanted to do was a critical decision to make. And as soon as I said critical, their eyes lit up and they're like, "What do you mean critical?" And I'm like, what have I stumbled into? It actually connoted a critical infrastructure, which is a specialized term in the energy space. And I will never forget that as long as I live, because it was just me being me, doing that. And I mentioned critical, and the entire tone of the room changed, and I learned my lesson that day.
So language is important, and that kind of gets us to the topic of data literacy being critical as well. Getting people not only to understand that business terminology, but the glossary and concepts around data. We've been doing a lot of work lately, setting up data literacy programs for organizations, and it's not just a matter of generic training them on BI terminology and stuff. What is a pie chart versus a bar chart versus a line chart? But really embedding it into their organization. But it all starts with language, ensuring that there's a common set of vernacular in the way that we talk about data within an organization.
It gets me thinking as we get older and our colleagues tend to get younger, we know that these the younger generation has grown up with a deeper technology sophistication as consumers versus older generations. There's just a natural comfort there. But what I found, and I'm curious what your perspective is that just because we are sophisticated consumers on our personal lives or in even our work lives, it doesn't necessarily mean we have all of the tools necessary to be data literate and to be effective data creators or data stewards as we have to take on these responsibilities for these data assets. Do you think that the way we deliver data literacy today has changed as a result of that? And would you even first agree with the kind of hypotheses that I'm throwing out there?
Yeah, those first hypothesis was that the digital natives, right, are much more comfortable with the concept of handling and using data and privacy and all that. And I would say, probably so. Mm-hmm. But they're also tend to be a bit more casual with it. As long as you're not doing anything bad, right, then it doesn't really matter what you post or how you handle your personal data too much. And most digital natives have found a way to generate benefits from sharing and exposing their data, right? And that could translate into the business world. I would suppose individuals who are comfortable with sharing their browsing habits or whatever in order to get better offers, that certainly can translate into the business world. I mean, we even see when you go into the grocery store, you scan your loyalty card and you get a discount for on your groceries, right? But we know it's really happening, and probably I would imagine digital natives also know what's happening, which is it's really a barter transaction. You're exchanging information about you and your purchase for free food, for some free food. We don't call it a barter transaction because that doesn't feel good to us, right? Discount feels much better,
right?
And it glosses over what's actually happening with our data. But that kind of scenario is happening much more in the B2B world, and the kind of thing that we at West Monroe are helping our clients with, which is to monetize their data in a broader amount of ways. And that does take a degree of literacy, helping them understand what are the different patterns of data monetization, what are the different ways that you can generate economic value from data. And even you mentioned GDPR, right? So GDPR makes, and the California Consumer Protection Act, it limits to some degree what you can do with your customer data,
right?
But it doesn't mean that you can't monetize it anymore. So when clients have come to us and said, right, we can't monetize our customer data because of these regulations, I said, well, you haven't really thought about it creatively enough, right? Let's flip that model on its head. You can't sell your data to others, but you could sell other stuff to your customers without ever exposing who those customers are. So I refer to that as an inverted data monetization model. So like we're working with a hospital who knows who its diabetes patients are, right? You can't sell that data or even share that data with anyone, but it can share others' offerings and products and services like healthy meal plans or gym memberships or at-home glucose monitoring test kits. They can share that with their own customers, their own members and patients, and take a cut of that action, right, without ever exposing who those people are. So.
Yeah, well, it definitely is something that we've talked about on the show before around there's different layers of data granularity or aggregation that start to trigger different levels of privacy or scrutiny or regulatory or what have you. And to your earlier point, like some of those systems are a little bit behind, to be generous, on where they are compared to the complexity of data. And that'll lead me to another question in a moment. But it makes me recall I had another pair of headphones that I had and that broke. the other day. One of the earpieces just stopped working, and I'm like, okay, well, let me go look where I bought that from. And I went to the internet site that they had, and I'm like, okay, let me see if there's a warranty on these things, because I think I got them about a year ago, and they've been great. But this thing is just weird; they just stopped working. And so I went and looked at the website, found the order, found the headphones. And I hadn't been to that website in a long time. And I noticed after I had, and to their credit, they gave me a warranty replacement. I've got to go ship them back and all that. But I noticed that from literally that afternoon and for the next several days, I have been seeing advertisements for those headphones that I went to, that I already own, that are just popping up all over the internet for me now. It's like, you really should look at these headphones. Yeah, and I'm like, wait a second. And then if I say the cart reminders and things like that, I didn't put it in the cart, but they're like, you were looking at these, you really should consider buying these. These are great. And I'm like, this is where you're almost at this line of stepping over this creepy factor of like data getting a little bit weird in how they're reacting to me, because I'm in like my situation is a little bit outside.
And they know you already bought these, and they know that you already returned them. Why would they be trying to sell you the same thing over and over again? That happens to me all the time, and I think it's there's some bad data science going on there.
There is. Well, and it just shows that we're still a bit in the infancy of the logic behind how they're doing these things. There's like, ooh, we saw eyeballs on this thing, let's go market it to them. It reminds me when I bought a humidifier, just a room humidifier from Amazon years ago. And Amazon's largely considered as some of the best in the business as far as managing metadata and doing cross-promotional things and all of that stuff. But I will tell you, after I'd shopped for the humidifier on Amazon, bought the humidifier on Amazon, I then proceeded to get all of this marketing for humidifier filters for every humidifier ever made. They were like, this guy's a huge humidifier fan. But they missed some key data in that process. So I want to...
There are scenarios like that in the B2B world where they're entirely missed, right? Like we moved homes a number of years ago, and when you move a home, you list your home, right? It goes into the MLS database. For those not in the U.S., it's the multiple listing service. It's basically a big national database of homes that are on the market, and so it's basically public knowledge, public data. And so everybody starts contacting you if you've put your home on the market recently. You get the fly-by-night mortgage companies and people trying to sell you loans and moving boxes and moving companies and landscapers and painters, and they all come out of the woodwork, right? And so the only company that didn't contact us when we moved was our own bank. I banked with them for through a series of acquisitions for like 40 years, and why didn't they reach out to me? And I asked a banker friend. He said, "Well, they thought maybe that was creepy." I'm like, I've got a 40-year relationship with them. It's public knowledge that I'm moving. There's a sign in my yard. How creepy is it for them to reach out and say, "Hey, we see you're moving. Can we offer you a mortgage, a home equity line? Can we print you new checks? Can we move the stuff in your safe deposit box? Can we, so on and so forth?" And what an entirely missed opportunity for them. The number one time when people move, change banks is when they move or get married or divorced. And what a tragic missed opportunity for them to recognize that there was some life event for one of their long-term customers. Maybe they don't want me as a customer anymore. I don't know. I was thinking how simple would it have been for them to hire some high school programmer, give them a can of Red Bull and say, write an app to match the customer database with the MLS database and tell us which of our customers are moving so we can offer them a mortgage, right?
Yeah.
So turns out the mortgage got subsumed by them. They probably lost a tenth of a point or an eighth of a point on it. They could have gone direct to me. So anyway, missed a lot of missed opportunities there. Data monetization doesn't need to be rocket science, right?
Well, and that's I think a pattern that we see all over the place is that people think that everything does need to be rocket science, and they miss the stuff right in front of their faces to try to do some fancy. Everybody wants machine learning. I'm like, we can't even do basic arithmetic with data a lot of the time, let alone machine learning. Let's just find I call it the fruit on the ground. Let's just pick the stuff up. We don't even need to reach up and pull it off the tree. It's already sitting there for us. It's going to go bad if we don't do something now.
a lot of companies say, well, it's not our business, monetizing data, it's not our thing. It's a little bit outside of our, or we can't get the resources or the budget for it. So one of the things we're doing at West Monroe is we're partnered with an investment bank, and they will fund data monetization efforts for our clients. So we'll go in and do the work. The investment bank will pay for the work, and then the owner of the data, the client, will actually get a revenue stream from however it's monetized, and without having to do any work other than give us access to their systems. The data goes into a trust where we have rights to it, and then they get a revenue stream, and the investors get paid back on that as well. It's a great model.
And that's actually in alignment with one of the topics that's been a common theme in recent episodes, which is this alignment of incentives. And one of the things that I'm always looking for with partners and business opportunities or what have you is when both sides have perfectly aligned incentives. So if you can create monetization from data in a way that can benefit everybody and grow that pie, now everybody involved is motivated to do the things together to grow the pie as much as possible. When we can find those opportunities, it's the best way of business you can get.
Yep, for sure.
So I want to expand. So we've talked a little bit about data as an asset, but there is, and in the spirit of great transitions, talking about things that are of top of mind and popular terms these days. We just did an episode on buzzwords not too long ago, but this one is one that I think has been getting a lot of news lately, is around digital currencies. And so data as an asset is one thing. Data as a currency, is that a whole nother thing, or is that just an evolution of the concept of data as an asset? Because that does actually create now a diminish, like now data does have this kind of scarcity where it represents something of tangible value. How does that impact, like how does Infonomics feel about that? Does it throw a monkey wrench into anything, or how do you explain it?
Well, let me make sure I know where you're going. So yes, companies will share and trade data for goods and services or commercial, favorable commercial terms, right? And so that's one way to monetize. It's one of the, 8 or 9 patterns of data monetization that we've identified, is making data available in exchange for goods and services or commercial, favorable commercial terms. Yeah. But are you talking about digital currencies? And that's not something I'm an expert in.
I'm just curious from a perspective, looking through a data as an asset lens. We have digital currencies, and it's less about the mechanics of how the currencies work or what have you. But when we are thinking about the virtual side of a tangible asset, which, I mean, fiat currencies as it is have some representative function, but does it matter that this is represented purely by data? Is there a evolution of data as an asset, or does it really matter that it's digital versus printed on paper? It's still a currency. It's still going to be tracked the same way we do dollars and cents today, and that the data value of it is not substantially different. I guess that's my question.
Yeah, well, the thing is, data can be duplicated. So unless you artificially restrict the digital instantiation of some tangible item, then you're not able to maintain that price point. Unless you artificially maintain scarcity, then you can't maintain that price point. So one of the data valuation models that I developed, the market value of data, looks at that, which is how many. You have to kind of attenuate the price point versus the market size, right, to optimize the revenue curve. And so because data is this non-rivalrous, non-depleting asset, we can create infinite copies of it, but we don't, because if we created infinite copies of it, its price point would devolve to zero, right? Yeah. So as with the revenue. So we want to maintain some kind of artificial scarcity for it. A great example of that is where I worked at Gartner, right? So Gartner, sells research reports. Obviously, they sell subscriptions too, but you can buy individual research reports, but they maintain a particular price point for those to make sure that it's something that's scarce and it's a premium for an organization to have access to that research report. The newspapers are another story. They want to sell as many as possible, but they still want to make revenue from them, so they sell them for $1.50 or $2. But that's a different, a whole different, similar model, but a different curve. Right?
Yeah, that's really interesting around the forced scarcity of data assets that could be theoretically copied. You're bringing me back to like microeconomics and my old economics courses where if you have infinite supply, the price is necessarily going to go to zero. It's going to get pressure all the way downward.
Yeah.
But if you create scarcity, then you will have a limitation there. So that makes a lot of sense.
Anthony, you might want to skip to the last chapter of my book, which is about applying economic models to data.
Yeah.
So it was a bit theoretical, but there were some prescriptive kind of recommendations that came out of that work that I did with some colleagues, where we examined traditional economic models like supply and demand and productivity frontiers and marginal utility and so forth, and said, hey, these models were all designed with traditional goods and services in mind. We go back to your econ class, we talk about guns and butter, right?
Yeah.
And so nobody had ever really thought about how do they apply to data, right? And so we gave that some thought and came up with some really interesting things like marginal utility, right? So we as humans feel marginal utility. I drink one beer, and that's great. I drink the second one, that's good. The third one, maybe not so much. After so many, I start to have maybe negative negative utility, right? That's we won't picture that. But to systems and computers, who are increasingly the primary consumers of data, do they feel marginal utility the way humans do? No, they don't. Right. So should that alter the way that we as producers or publishers of data architect these systems? Yeah, probably yes. And so some of our recommendations were how to change the way that we architect data production, data collection, data distribution kinds of systems. And then I think I told you before the show, I also teach a course on Infonomics at the University of Illinois Geese Business School. And one of the assignments I give the students is to pick any economic model and apply it to data. And does it break down? Does it still work? Is it irrelevant? How would you alter it? And so I have dozens and dozens of really interesting papers from students on this, and I'm trying to get them published. I had a dozen students in my first time I taught the class. I had 60 last year. I had 400 this year in the class. So I've got a real great body of papers from this one assignment that I'd love to publish.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think about other representations of data, like lately TikTok has been going crazy with how many people are out there. It seems like everyone today wants to be a content producer and want to have just whatever they're doing out there. And like we heard the same thing with Twitter back in the day too. It's like, does anybody really care what I had for lunch today? Apparently they do. And so do we see that people as data or our entertainment as data, is that changing anything? I feel like there's so many things about data that you've captured, like with Infonomics, but also just in our data space that aren't fundamentally changing. I see very little fundamental change personally, but I see new manifestations of patterns that we've seen before. Do you see anything truly novel today in how data is evolving?
Again, I'm thinking about this more at an enterprise level, and most organizations have an entire department dedicated to procuring office supplies, right?
Yeah.
All my pens from conference. I need to go to some more conferences. My pens are running out. Right?
No kidding.
But most companies don't have a single person dedicated to procuring data supplies. There is a wealth of data out there. Most companies obviously have a hard time generating value from their own data, but maybe one of the ways they could do that is by integrating it with external data sources. There are data sources from syndicated data providers like the Dun & Bradstreets and all down the line. There must be 5,000 or maybe 10,000 now companies that are selling data as a primary offering. There are billions of websites that can be harvested. Content can be harvested from. There are tens of millions of open data sets published by government organizations and NGOs and others. There is social media content, right, that can be harvested as well. And so to not have an individual in your organization who is aware of all of these data sources and their potential to drive value for your organization is, I would say, irresponsible of any organization today to not have a full-time data curator.
Yeah. I think the point is well made, and I would imagine this audience of ours at Data Leadership Lessons would be nodding their head, quite extremely right now. So I do want in the few minutes that we have left, and I know a lot of your strategic work with West Monroe, you're going to be working with organizations of some size and some resources to be doing, pretty big things that impact their organizations. For those out there that are in smaller organizations or maybe entrepreneurs, do you have any advice for them on things they could be doing to make the most of their data assets, or some practices that would help them, continue to be good stewards of the information that they have, so that they can capitalize on it when they have an ability to?
Almost any startup today is capturing some source of data from the transactions or the observations or their own activity, and so I would encourage them to consider the range of ways that data could be generating value for them, and bake that into their business model. So even if it isn't really a core part of their business model, make it so, right? And there are examples of companies that, there's one company I worked with that was building an analytic database. And they briefed me while I was a Gartner, and I said, well, this is great. Everybody else and their brothers building a bigger, better, faster analytic database. And they said, well, ours is great. I said, well, how do you know how great it is? And they said, well, because we ingest BitTorrent traffic. I said, well, wonderful. I said, how much BitTorrent traffic do you ingest? They said, all of it. I said, what? I said, you have data about every application and software and music, track that's being shared illicitly over BitTorrent? They're like, yeah, we sure do. I said, that data would be more valuable to the producers of that content than your little database would be. And they actually pivoted. It's a company called True Optic. They're now one of the top over-the-top OTT data providers, and with clients like Disney and CBS and others now who are saying, yeah, we want to know when people are illegally trading copies of our TV shows and movies, and where they are and where they're moving from. Not specifically which individuals, but they want to know where there's unmonetized demand for their products and services. So, think about the ways that you can use data in alternative ways. If you need help, reach out to a consultant like me just to ideate for a little bit. I run workshops on this stuff and bake it into your business model.
Yeah, well, and that gets the wheels turning, because it is something where the data that you encounter in whatever you've started your business to do could lead to entirely new business opportunities that nobody else might see because of your unique vantage point. So that's great advice.
Right. We're working with a pharmaceutical wholesaler, and we did some workshops with them and generated a few dozen ideas on how to better leverage their data. 3 of the top ideas, we run them through kind of a feasibility analysis: economic feasibility, legal, ethical, operational, technical, and determined that the 3 top ideas, if they implemented them, would generate a revenue stream of $75 to $100 million a year. And this is something that's validated by their CFO. So there's a lot of untapped ways to leverage your data. A lot of patterns that companies aren't considering. They don't even have a data monetization function in their organization. And so that's where I enjoy helping companies.
Absolutely. And so one more question for you on to kind of flip the other side of the coin from strategic opportunities to take a business. For those folks out there in the audience that may be earlier in their career or trying to figure out how they create a career in data, what are the kinds of gaps as you look at across the entirety of enterprises out there? What kind of patterns do you see in terms of where are those gaps? Where are the needs for those businesses in terms of capable people to deliver these big ideas that are going to continue, I think, to transform how our organizations work and drive value from data?
Yeah, I think obviously data science is a big area, but data scientists aren't always the most creative ones or coming up with those ideas. They'll definitely execute on them, but I wouldn't count on most data scientists to be the ones who are ideating around data. It takes somebody with an understanding of the marketplace, the industry, maybe other industries. I often get asked by clients, what are others in our industry doing? And my flippant response is, why do you want to be in second place? Why not look at what others in other industries are doing and adapt those ideas to your own business? But yeah, having somebody who's creative, heads up, innovative is really, really important. Having somebody who's thinking about the economics of data and data as an asset. What does that mean to the organization? I call all my graduating students, we call them economists instead of economists, right? And so, folks like that can really help an organization think through the variety of ways to leverage data innovatively, but also architect it appropriately for the future.
Fantastic. And I think that's great advice for anybody who is out there. And if you don't already have a copy of Infonomics, you should definitely pick one up. But it's it's something that will help you reframe how you think about data and plugs in it fills in a lot of the connective tissue, the gaps between where a lot of deep study is. And I think that's, part of the reason why it's been so successful. And Doug, before we go, we are just about out of time, but, I just want to thank you too, from a fellow data management practitioner, for the contributions that you've made over many years to the space.
You as well.
And it's been awesome getting to know you and talking with you. And again, say hi to the gang over at West Monroe. But I definitely appreciate how you're continuing to try to push forward change in this industry and help bring folks. I'm so happy for you on the U of I educational side. I think that's something that is really important. So I really
appreciate that, Anthony. Thanks. And I was going to offer to any of your executive listeners who are interested in a copy of the book, they can reach out to me, and we make copies available to chief data officers and folks like that. So.
Right. Fantastic. And we will certainly include the relevant links in the show notes. And so, Doug, thanks again. Thank you for being on the show, and really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Anthony. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Thanks. And thank you all for joining us today. You'll find more information and links in the show notes. Dive deeper with my book at dataleadershipbook.com and use promo code ALGMANDL at the Dataversity Online Training Center for 20% off your first purchase. Please remember to follow Data Leadership Lessons on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you enjoy the show, please rate and review and help others find us. Stay safe during these unusual times and go make an impact.